Good Thursday evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here for live weather impact for this May 14th, 2026. We are now seeing a very pleasant Thursday and Friday shaping up with temperatures cooler, but it is Thursday, and as we always have done and do all the time on these Thursdays is we talk about the drought monitor. It comes out every Thursday. Remember last week we were talking about the drought monitor, and it didn't include the rain that we had just gotten overnight into Thursday afternoon. Well, this week did include that rainfall. So let's take a look at what happened. Weather 2 there, Sean. I don't have control over weather 1, unfortunately. But the drought monitor this week, temperatures were very cool the last couple of days, but we have not seen a lot of rainfall. So unfortunately, the lack of rain has been a big problem. But we have seen some subtle improvement. So what we're seeing across the Charlotte areas, we've seen the exceptional drought removed and a small area of extreme drought removed. Now, that is technically an improvement, but we're still in severe to extreme drought for most of the metro area. It really kind of tells you how bad it is because we got over 2 inches of rain last week and it just barely moved the needle. But this is a baby step. And if we were to see something like that every week for the next several weeks, then every week we would see these baby steps continue and eventually we slowly begin out of drought. So that's why we need the consistency of this rain. The problem is now we're back to a dry period. It's been dry since then. And next week, when we have the drought monitor, it's very likely going to go back the other way a little bit. Probably not exceptional, but we'll probably see widespread extreme drought for everybody. It's a gorgeous day. I mean, I know we're in a drought, but boy, it's so nice out there. Look at these temperatures. It is just beautiful with mostly sunny skies. We have really chilly conditions up in the mountains. I'll show you the morning temperatures tomorrow because we're going to wake up to 40s in the morning. I'll show you the current temperatures because if you're in the mountains and foothills, it's been a cold day. I mean, that upper low has really chilled you down. 40s and 50s, you get up there aloft a little bit and it's certainly chilly. Down here in the Piedmont, we're in the low 70s and it's bone dry. I mean, we don't barely have any moisture out there, so incredibly dry air in place. Wild stat, and I saw Tim post this and we'll probably talk about it coming up in a minute, but for a lot of locations, it's been colder in May than it was for all of April. Now, this says two things. April was crazy hot by April standards, and May, not crazy cool, but definitely below average. And to put this in perspective, April was about 5 degrees above average. May, is just slightly below 4 degrees. So there's about a 1 degree difference there, but it has been a complete flip. We're basically having April weather in May, and we had the May weather in April. It's kind of like a reverse. We just didn't do it in the right order. That's back in March and April. We were talking about how hot it was and how crazy it was. That's why it was way out of the ordinary for this time of year. So tomorrow, beautiful day. End the work week. It's a Friday. Yay, Friday is awesome. Temperatures mid to upper 70s. Average highs about 80. So right near that, if not slightly below. What a great end to the work week. And again, get out and enjoy it because we are going to see some pretty substantial changes going into the weekend. High pressure is in control. So no issues with rain at all this weekend. But we will see a slow but steady warm up. Upper 70s tomorrow, likely mid-80s on Saturday, and near 90 by Sunday. So rain chances, are we going to see any? Well, unfortunately, not in the next 7 days. That's why next week's drought monitor is likely going to swing back the other way. The pendulum's going to go back because we're not seeing the 1 inch of rain we need per week to maintain just normal rainfall, let alone make up the deficit. So late next week, you see Wednesday, small chance. Thursday, 40-50% chance. That's actually a sign of maybe more of a summer pattern shaping up late next week. I'm actually somewhat optimistic that we'll start to get into an everyday thunderstorm pattern. Not that everyone's going to get a ton of rain, but at least that starts introducing rain to some folks. And every day somebody will get something when a lot of us don't. The one thing that helps that out is moisture. So the dew points, while I'm not a fan of mugginess, it's going to slowly get more humid over the next 7 days. So by next week, dew points low to mid 60s. It'll start feeling humid and sticky, and that will allow for some pop-up storms. As far as the amount of rain between now and next week, just not much. So again, between now and Thursday, probably not a lot of rain. I think if we see moisture, it's going to be after Thursday. And here's what I'm talking about. Bone dry air. I mean, this is like desert climate today, tomorrow, start of Saturday, but starting Sunday, we start to see humidity creep up as moisture starts streaming in, and it gets really deep to our west, really active severe weather track for the middle of the country. And then you could see going into late next week, maybe a front, maybe squeezing some of that moisture out. Boy, that sure would be nice. So we'll keep an eye on that. And speaking of that, I always like to give people a sneak peek of next weekend. Not this weekend, next weekend, because it is Coke 600 weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Saturday, Sunday, right now, we're looking at temperatures probably low 80-ish, maybe 81, 82, both days. And right now, I'm going to put a 40% chance of storms for the Speedway. That could go up or down. I would just tell you, tune back in. 9 to 10 day forecast, pretty good on temperatures. Rainfalls specific forecasts are really difficult to forecast that far out. So I would definitely check back going into next week, especially as we get closer. But just a heads up for all the NASCAR fans out there. Temperature wise, you can see the 6 to 10 day outlook showing above average temperatures. Certainly going to be warm next week. And it really starts this weekend, to be honest with you. Look at the heat that cranks up this weekend. Temperatures on Saturday, mid 80s. By Sunday, we're pushing 90 degrees. So very, very toasty out there. Here's a look at that Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Temperatures on the increase. Tomorrow, the last cool day. We'll see temperatures back into the mid 80s for Saturday. On Sunday, we're back up close to 90. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, those temperatures in the low 90s, increasing humidity levels. Wednesday, very small chance of rain, but Thursday it starts to spike. And I'll show you the 10-day forecast, which starts taking us into next weekend, which, again, 9 to 10 days out. It's also Memorial Day weekend, not only Coke 600 weekend. We could see scattered showers and storms around, and temperatures maybe slightly cooler, closer to 80. Again, a lot of time between now and then. Specific forecasts that far out, we're just not that good at it. So I kind of look at the trends. Certainly looks like a wetter pattern from a scattered storm standpoint, and at least temperature-wise, I wouldn't call it crazy warm. I wouldn't call it crazy cool. Temperatures probably trending a little bit closer to average for this time of year. So coming up after the break, we're going to have Tim Buckley back in. We'll talk about this pattern, the drought monitor, what's going on there. We will see more improvement. Talk a little about El Nino, La Nina. That's all coming up after the break.
Weather Impact Live with Brad Panovich is sponsored by Moisture Lock, crawl space, basement, and foundation repair experts serving the Carolinas since 1988.
Tired of all this rain? Does your yard look like a swamp after it rains? Hi, I'm Greg Doggett with Moisture Lock, Charlotte's premier waterproofing and foundation repair company. The longer water sits, the softer soil will become. This can cause foundation issues. If you're having drainage issues, contact Moisture Lock. We'll get the water away from your home and out of your yard.
Moisture Lock, stabilize, enhance, protect.
Buckley joins me as always from WFMY. Tim, it's Thursday. Welcome in. We know what Thursday is around here. We're kind of getting used to the drill. I feel like last Thursday at this time we were anticipating this, right? Last Thursday we showed you the drought. It got a lot worse, and we were trying to tell people, hey, the rain that just fell in the last 24 hours did not count in last week's monitor. It was going to count in this week's drought monitor. And sure enough, technically there was improvement, especially in Charlotte. We got rid of the exceptional drought and a small area of extreme drought, but I'm really hard-pressed to say it was a big deal because it was kind of a baby step. That's the kind of way I look at it, because it's hard to tell people, like, hey, we saw improvement, but we're still in extreme to severe drought. It's not like, I think the way I put it today, it's like, oh, we're not in Cat 5 drought, we're in a Cat 4 drought now. It's like, it's still pretty bad, right? It's not like we've gone down all that much.
Still pretty bad, for sure. And, for most of the state, Brad, y'all are kind of the exception.
Yes.
Maybe the only area that improved.
Yes,
in
very
any
true.
Meaningful way. Whether it's meaningful or not can be debated.
Yeah.
But the rest of the state either was staying the same or even got worse. A little sliver of our area up here, the Mount Airy region, parts of the northern Piedmont, they really missed in the rain completely last week, and so they were upgraded to extreme. So by the numbers, the level of extreme drought, the D3, grew.
Yes.
Whereas that little 1% sliver of exceptional drought totally washed away. So, like you said, not a huge difference, but we always like to reference that graphic that they put out from the State Climate Office.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting what they mentioned about your stream flow in the Mecklenburg County area.
Yeah, it definitely went up, and I actually witnessed that firsthand. I was on the Greenway a day after that rain fell, and it was flooded. But that's, is what's supposed to happen. But boy, it went down quickly. The biggest issue for us, Tim, was a lot of that rain fell over Charlotte South. It didn't really replenish our main water supply, which is the Catawba River chain, right? You got to think about Lake James, Lake Hickory, Lake Rhodus, Lake Norman, Lake Wiley did get some water from the rain, but Mountain Island Lake, which is actually where the intake is for the Charlotte drinking water, we really love to see that rain up in the mountains and foothills. That was replenish our water supply more. So it definitely made the grass green. I will tell you that. My lawn looked amazing. We are seeing a lot of the short term because the topsoil got really wet. But as we saw in that statewide summary from the Climate Office, they mentioned that, the surface moisture was pretty good, but the deeper soil is still very, very dry.
Sure. And that's something that you really need. And, it's kind of interesting. We're not social scientists. We don't really proclaim to be. But whenever posting about this, there's an odd kind of pushback from a segment of online folk. And I'm not really sure why. It might just be the way that things are in 2026. But it's almost a crowd that are trying to say it's not a drought. And this is just something that happens. Well, droughts do happen, but it doesn't mean they're not real. And, you can talk to a farmer right now, and gosh, when they've had an inch of rain in the last 2 months, they're having a tough time, and they're going to lose money this year. And that's a drought. So we're in a pretty bad one.
I think you're right. There is something about, I think droughts are just hard for people to grasp because it's not like snow. We always joke about how snow is such a visceral thing for people because they can go out in their yard and see it and measure it and feel it, and it's really easy.
Sure.
Rainfall, I've even joked, like, if it rains in the middle of the night when people sleep, they don't think it rained because they didn't see it. And so drought is weird like that. It's hard to visualize, unless you go to a lake Memorial Day weekend and realize, wow, the water is really low. If you can't see it, it's hard for you to visualize. And it's such a long duration thing. It's like we're such a spur of the moment, very short attention span society. It rained last Thursday. What do you mean we're in a drought? Well, it really hasn't rained since last October, but we forget about everything since that time because most of us don't remember what we had for dinner last Thursday. And we're trying to tell people, hey, remember last fall when it didn't rain? No, nobody remembers that, Tim. Nobody remembers that. So it is hard. But I think the thing Tim, that will make this more real is, one, the water restrictions at midnight for us go into effect, and when fines start showing up at people's doors. And I think Memorial Day weekend, when people start getting out on area waterways, I think they're going to start seeing that visual aspect of the drought and go, wow, the water is low in this lake, reservoir, stream, wherever I canoe, boat, kayak, whatever. I think that's when we'll start to really, and then when lawns start browning and dying and gardens and stuff, that's when I think people will notice.
I think you're right, and boating season might be a big part of it. And, it really is interesting. It depends on the lake. It's so interesting to see how some are very badly affected right now with very low levels, and others are only a little bit below. And so it's a little uneven with the lake levels. But if you know your area and you know your lakes, for example, I was walking a trail yesterday right along Lake Townsend here in Greensboro, which is our biggest one. There's a little shoreline that's evident right now. The water level is about a foot to a foot and a half below typical. And there's not usually any shoreline. So that's just a little small detail that I'm noticing. Yeah. But if you're, there's some lakes in the Raleigh area right now, and yours too, the docks aren't working. They're not docks anymore. They're just piers on mud. And so that's a real impact. And, well, it'll be different for Memorial Day, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're right. It depends on what kind of lake and what the source is. Like for us, the Catawba River chain, the lakes we have are it's really a river, Tim, that's just been dammed up in spots. So I think because of that, you notice the levels fluctuate much more frequently because the lake is just flooded land from the dam. And normally there's water that's filling it up and flowing through. So I think on some of these coves and stuff, which were pretty shallow to begin with, they dry up pretty quickly, and it's just more noticeable, especially as Duke kind of moves some of the water around. You notice that quite a bit in some of those areas. But it will be interesting going forward. I think, Tim, I don't know. I think I have a sneaky suspicion because we're not going to have any rain between drought monitors, right? We might see some areas go back to extreme drought next week. It might. I don't think we'll go to exceptional, but I did see some rumblings in the Raleigh area because of the surface water. There might be some exceptional droughts next week up in that area, but we might see it get worse next week when the next one comes out.
And whether it's next week or the week after or whatever the case may be, we need a major pattern change to stop it and stop it from getting worse and kind of reverse the trend, because we've not done that yet. And there's not a huge signal of us reversing the trend either. Yeah. Maybe some rain toward the end of next week, but it doesn't look super meaningful. And so I think a lot of people keep asking us, well, what about El Nino, or what about the long-term patterns, or is there anything that's coming our way to get rid of this? And in the short term, I think the answer is probably no. Yeah. In the very long term, that might be different. But there's been a lot of El Nino discussion lately, and we got a little bit of new guidance from NOAA today on kind of what they're thinking.
Yeah, so I can't show it because for some reason my laptop isn't routed. So I'll kind of explain to you. Yeah, what Tim is referring to is NOAA put out their May ENSO update, which ENSO is, we love acronyms, we love them. El Nino Southern Oscillation. That's what we call this phenomena, right? But right. What's interesting, Tim, is the probability of an El Nino, I think, has increased to like 98% by the end of the summer and fall. And like it peaks in this October, November, December range. And the chances of a very strong El Nino are way up there as well. It's like 90% plus chance. There we go. We got Tim's graphic there. Thank you, Tim. We could show yours, but that's a graphic I was referring to. The bottom one in particular kind of shows those probabilities. I mean, you don't have to be much of a meteorologist or a chart reader to know when those are all pegged at the very top. That's a really high probability of an El Nino. But Tim, the important part here is when you look at where the highest probabilities, it's really like fall, winter. I think that's where a lot of people get lost. They think, oh, we'll get out of the drought. But if that's going to happen, Tim, because of El Nino, and we don't know that for sure, the earliest is like October, November, December, maybe, or September, maybe, but it's really fall and winter. It will not be this summer.
It won't. And so, the way that they work these graphics is they talk about El Nino or La Nina in 3-month groups. So right here where it says SON, that means September, October, November, and so on and so forth. So the highest chances of having a really strong El Nino is the Octobers, the Novembers, all the way through February of that sort. And that's really significant. I mean, that dark maroon color, that means that they're suggesting there's a great chance that this could be one of the strongest El Ninos on record. And so what does that mean? Well, it means the winter could be potentially pretty darn wet. Yeah. But that's the winter. It also means you might have few, if any, hurricanes And that sounds great, but we talked about this yesterday and the last couple of days. If you don't get tropical systems and you don't get hurricanes that are impacting the southeast, it's good, but it also means you don't get that moisture. And that's part of the reason we got into this mess in the first place, is the avoidance of tropical systems from the southeast, except for Chantal. Other than that, we've been really dry from tropical moisture since July.
Yeah, I was on a local radio show this morning, hour-long talk called Charlotte Talks with the State Climate Office, and that's what we talked a lot about was, tropical systems, Tim. I don't think people realize in the southeast, I think the number, last time I looked, the research, it's like 25-30% of our annual rainfall comes from tropical systems, either directly or indirectly, which means remnants, that's a pretty significant part of our rainfall. And if we don't get those, that actually is a pretty substantial part of our rain. So, I mentioned this earlier. I said, hey, we'd love to get a weak tropical system. It's like, we don't want tropical system. Like, yeah, we don't want a Hugo, a Fran, a Helene, a Matt, and nothing like that. But you wouldn't mind like a tropical wave or a weak tropical system that doesn't stall and just gives us a good soaking. That's kind of what we get usually every year, right? Something like that.
And what we might be able to do, I wonder, and this is just speculation, if you can't get the big storms that come over from Africa, and gosh, we don't want those anyway because they can usually be the bad ones. Sometimes in a pattern like this, maybe you would be able to have some what we call homegrown systems. Those are ones that form closer to land, off the Carolinas, in the Gulf. Chantal was a homegrown system. It really was. And we saw what that did. We don't want that level of problem, but you can still get beneficial rain from those. And it's going to take stuff like that, big events, to make any big dent in our drought. But this is really down the line. This is not going to happen in the next month or two, but maybe toward the end of summer and early fall, we could see some changes.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping for. But speaking of El Nino in the winter, I want to quickly show kind of the pattern that we typically get. And Sean, if you can bring up my computer here.
Sure.
So for folks that don't know what El Nino means for us, it is crazy, Tim, and this is really kind of a cool thing about weather. This massive warm water in the equatorial eastern Pacific has such a big impact on world weather. And for us, during the December, January, February timeframe, the Pacific jet stream is really active across the southern part of the country. And so in the southeast, including the Carolinas, it's cool and wet normally, right? And immediately all my winter weather fans and skiers are like, oh, that means tons of snow. Not necessarily. It could, but it could mean a lot of cold rains. And but what we do know for sure, Tim, is it usually means a higher chance of rain. But we always caution there's exceptions to every rule. This is the average. Just like the average high today was 80, and it wasn't 80 in Charlotte, right? The average for an El Nino winter is this. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means on a normal setup, if you averaged all the El Nino years out, they would be wetter than normal.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, I guess it would stand to reason probably the stronger the El Nino, the stronger the signals that we would expect to happen. But I guess we'll dive into that as we get a little bit closer to winter and narrow down those analogs.
Yeah.
But if you start to look at the comparisons to 97, 98, boy, oh boy, that's a year that goes down in the record books. Brad, I was on a family vacation to San Diego in the February of 98. It rained like every day, and there were mudslides every day. I mean, that was the El Nino that people really reference as a generational one. We'll see what happens this winter, but winter's still a long way away, and a lot.
It's
can
not
happen
even summer
between
yet,
now and then to make our situation a lot worse. I know. So I'm pretty concerned that we have a long way to go before things get any better.
Yeah, I hope it's a wet one because at least it gives you like a light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll get to that point eventually. Yeah, I remember that 97, 98 El Nino. That was one that California remembers quite a bit as well. Tim, one thing I want to do is I do want to go back and look at some of the strong El Ninos and see those analog years for us and kind of come up with how much rain did we get during the cool season. So I might do that. I might crunch the numbers and just see what that means for us. But this summer, it's El Nino could have the opposite effect. It it tends to, reduce hurricanes, at least the number, because of wind shear. But we always caution people, it only takes one. And sometimes in these weird El Nino hurricane seasons, you might get fewer storms, but the ones that do develop could be really strong because the water usually is pretty warm in the Atlantic and the Gulf, as it is right now. So if you do get little pockets of lower wind shear, you can get one to spin up real quickly. And so we don't want people to say, hey, it's going to be a good hurricane season. Nope, it only takes one, and that's always something we're very cautious of.
Yep, great points. It only is. One hurricane can be bad enough, and all you need to do is talk to someone in Chapel Hill or Burlington from last year and Saxbahaw and those areas. They're still cleaning up from Chantal, which was a little tiny tropical storm. That's
Yeah,
all
it was little. So, Tim, I think both you and I kind of speculated at this, and I'm glad we have some numbers to go with it. You put some numbers together. I did too. I love how you had put it in reverse. I said April or May because I feel like our months have been flipped. And it really, at the time, it felt like it. It was like in April, I was like, wow, this is super warm because I love April. April to me is like October here. Those 2 months are some of the best weather we get here, these warm days, cool nights. And we got kind of robbed this April because it was really warm for almost the entire month. And now May has felt like it is like April weather. And the numbers kind of pan this out, at least so far. For you guys, look at your numbers. That's pretty significant for you guys.
We're about halfway through the month of May now. So I first looked at these stats last week, Brad, but now that we're halfway through, I'm starting to wonder how close this is going to be. Because a 4-degree difference, it might not sound like much. That's very significant statistically. So to have a 4-degree gap between April being warmer and May being cooler, that's a lot. With 2 to 3 weeks left to go, we'll see if May can catch up. We have a heat wave next week. There's plenty of time to make up the gap. But this is interesting too, Brad. I looked at every year. It's only happened one time in Greensboro history.
Wow.
1954 was the only time we had May cooler than April. And I know you saw similar numbers here with Charlotte.
Yeah, so let's look at our numbers in Charlotte. Not quite as extreme, but pretty close. Over 3-degree difference. 62.8 has been our average temperature in May. In April, it was 66.0. What's crazy is April was 5 degrees above average, and April so far has been 4 degrees below average. So that's a pretty dramatic difference. But I think you're right. It'll be interesting to see with this heat wave coming if we'll reverse that. I remember a lot of March and February's doing this, Tim, when we've had really warm winters, and it's like people think, all right, we're going to go straight into spring, and then all of a sudden March comes, and March ends up being colder than February. It is weird to get later into the spring season and have this happen, though.
Yeah, the stats show this is harder to do than that February-March reversal, which you're right, had been common in recent years.
Yeah. So interesting stats. Get ready for the heat this weekend, guys. We're out of time. I'm sure we'll talk more about that coming up tomorrow. Stick around. We got more news coming up.